Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's 60-minute presentation as part of the webinar series of Wednesday Rainmaking by the Women Rainmakers of the American Bar Association Law Practice Division. This webinar is being recorded and will be featured on the Law Practice Division's YouTube channel. Our moderator and panelist today is Jeanne Lee. Jeanne is a committee member of the Women Rainmakers Committee. Jeanne is also an attorney and a leadership and business development coach who speaks nationally on strategic networking for introverts, negotiation skills for women, communication skills in the workplace, and world-class speaking secrets. Additionally, she is a contributing chapter author to the Amazon #1 bestseller, World Class Speaking in Action, and to Marketing Success, How Did She Do That?, published by the ABA. Thank you all for joining us. We will now begin the webinar.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you all for joining us today on our Coaches for Call webinar. We have on the call today women in solo practice. We have a wide range from starting with women in solo practice as well as women who are in firms of 5,000 or more. The mission of the ABA Women Rainmakers is to educate professional women about marketing and business development, to provide mentoring opportunities for members, and to provide networking opportunities to build personal and professional relationships. You will find up-to-date information on our activities on our homepage or Googling ABA Women Rainmakers Law Practice Division. Our next Wednesday Rainmaking by the Women Rainmakers of the Law Practice Division webinar series will be on December 11th, entitled Conversations Across Generations. Elizabeth Jolliffe is a business development and career management coach for lawyers. Her experience as a former Clark Hill partner and commercial litigator for 19 years informs her understanding of her clients' challenges and opportunities. In working with lawyers across the country, from solos to large firms, junior associates to partners, Elizabeth focuses on helping each person get what they want by being more of their best self. Elizabeth is an active bar leader and practices what she preaches by being very involved with her niche attorney market. Marianne is the women's lawyers coach. Next slide. She is a nationally recognized trainer, coach, inspirational speaker, and author who works exclusively with women lawyers to help them build their books of business and navigate their careers strategically. Marianne believes that having one's own client base gives women lawyers options they may not have otherwise and creates greater self-determination in their careers. She has worked with over 2,000 lawyers in the U.S. and Canada, teaching them the skills they need to grow in their own book of business and guiding them to succeed in whatever way in which they define success. So, Marianne, Elizabeth, thank you again for joining us today. The three of us will be discussing our answers to the questions that have been previously submitted to us, and you can submit questions to us as we move along in today's webinar. Okay, so let's begin Coaches on Call 2019. We had many questions on the feedback and the evaluation process. So question number one, next slide. How to take feedback in the evaluation process or at other times. So we tried to group the questions together and they kind of sorted out to 4 areas: how to take feedback graciously, how to respond to male managers or clients that they tell you to soften your voice, how to overcome being afraid of conflict or afraid of disagreeing with others, and how to get respect as a junior lawyer. So we're going to start off with Elizabeth. How to take feedback graciously.
Thanks, Jeanne. I think that we talked about this in terms of people were asking, how do I not take it personally? And feedback is personal. It is feedback about you and your professional role. So I think first to recognize that if you are taking it personally and you have some emotion around that, that is natural, that's perfectly fine. And the first thing to do when you're accepting the feedback is to pause, to breathe, to collect your thoughts. It may be very, very positive feedback and you're very excited and you don't need to pause or breathe or anything like that. But if it's feedback that you didn't expect, or if it's some negative, although constructive feedback, just make sure that first you pause and you breathe and you collect your thoughts. And second, make sure that you understand the feedback that you're being given. And I'm interpreting this, Jeanne, as like feedback that someone is speaking to you face to face or over the phone or whatever, rather than in writing. Is that right?
I think we can frame. Yeah, I think we can frame the answer to that today in terms of that kind of framework.
Right. Okay. So that's the assumption I'll use, and so make sure that you understand what it is the person is saying, and if you don't understand, ask for clarification, and then even more specifically, ask for examples, because that's what will help you learn and help you adjust behavior if you need to, or at least to consider whether or not you need to adjust your behavior or to have a further discussion with the person. And specifically ask for the context in which perhaps examples were given, or the feedback, someone's telling you need to correct this behavior or modify your tone or whatever. Ask for some examples and ask for the context so you can really understand and either use it going forward or not. And then keep in mind who the speaker is, who's the messenger. And I think that Marianne had some really good tips and probably more to say about that in terms of understanding the messenger, the person who's giving the feedback.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I'll chime in. I build on what you said, which is when seeking the feedback, one of the easier ways to do it, to not put the person who's giving you the feedback in a defensive position, is to ask the question, if you were me, or if you were in my position. So if you get the feedback and you're not sure what that really means, certainly continue the dialogue and say something like, if you were me, what steps would you take to build on that? Or if you were in my position, how would you prioritize that? Would you do this or would you do that? So that you can get feedback related to the context that Elizabeth was referring to. I agree that it's natural to feel, to take issues to heart and to take them personally. Acknowledge that, it's okay, ride through the emotion. But then I think many of us are self-aware enough to recognize which part of it is ego. And I confess to having some of that. So recognizing what part is ego, and then what part of it though is justified, and things that you may be getting feedback on, but you know your worth and you want to take comfort in knowing your worth, and you may just not want to settle for the feedback that you've gotten. And that's to what Elizabeth was referring to, that I really think it's important to really think about, where's the feedback coming from? If it's feedback from a client, that's one thing. If it's feedback from a male manager, that's another. You want to consider the source. You want to consider whether this is, someone who has a reputation for giving that type of criticism and people just let it roll, or whether it's someone that you highly respect and you really want to get the context for what that person is saying, because it may be time for some introspection. And then one last thought on that is, when I take things to heart and, and it's hard to let the emotion go, I set a time frame for my pity party and say, I'm going to allow this to creep into my thoughts until tomorrow afternoon at 4 o'clock, and then I'm done. And then after tomorrow o'clock at 4 o'clock, I am done. And when it creeps back into my mind, I don't even go there. I just release it because I've set a deadline. And I find for me that allowing myself some time to process, but then putting a deadline on it is very helpful.
And Elizabeth and Marianne, just a real quick question before we move on to some other questions. Does it make a difference whether it's a client who's telling you to soften your tone or a male manager? Marianne, you start.
Oh, I think it definitely makes a difference. I think with a client, you're going to want to think about, what the feedback is, why it is that they perhaps are wanting something different or wanting a change, because the goal, of course, is service to the client. And so I would listen very carefully to what they're saying and then ask questions if it's not clear or if you have a different viewpoint. With a male manager, I think it depends on if it's someone who's a mentor, if it's someone who has your best interests at heart, if it's someone who's been an ally or an advocate for you. I do believe that it's worth the introspection, the thought. But if it's someone who's just a crotchety old practice group chair or just having a bad day and dump it on you, then you recognize it and just let it roll.
And I think there's also, this is Jeannie, I think there's also professionals out there who can work with your tone of voice as well. And that's for men and women in different situations. So if it gets to the point where you feel you need more assistance, then there are vocal coaches out there, which even actors and actresses use. So the next question I want to jump to is how to overcome being afraid of conflict or afraid of disagreeing with others. And we'll start with Elizabeth.
Thanks, Jeannie. This is a really common feeling. I work with so many female litigators, and they will say, male litigators will say this too. They'll say, Elizabeth, I really don't like confrontation. I don't like conflict, and they're even thinking seriously of getting into another legal area because they don't think that their personality and that this discomfort is right for a litigator. And what we work on is recognizing that many of us have that, the fear of conflict, the discomfort with confrontation. And first they have to recognize, where does it come from? Is it a fear of being right or being wrong, not having the answer? And then we look at what's the worst case scenario? And this question, of course, works for lots of things that people have, lots of challenges people have. So what's the worst case scenario here? What's going to happen if you do have a disagreement with someone? Are you going to get fired? Is your client going to fire you? Are they not going to pay the bill? Is your practice group leader going to, never give you an assignment again? Or is it just that someone's going to be unhappy with you and write some time off, or a client is, ask for a discount, or opposing counsel is going to be mad for a bit, but then of course you'll be talking to him or her the next day. So what's the worst case scenario? And then that can oftentimes, most of the time, will bring your fear down to a manageable size, and you can see it in a much more realistic light. And those are some of the things that I think can help with that discomfort or that fear of conflict or confrontation.
And Marianne, what would you add?
I would add that it's important to recognize your own conflict style. I took one of those tests, I think it was called a TKI, and I found out that I'm a 90% avoider, meaning 90% of the time when there's conflict, I'll avoid it. And that was very insightful for me. I think I knew it on some level, but I didn't really think about how off the charts it was compared to the other 4 styles that people use to resolve conflict. And so what I realized is I leave money on the table. I don't bring conversations up when they're until it's absolutely necessary. I give in too frequently. And once I understood that that was my style, I became much more aware of it, and I was able first to not take it so personally, but also to work towards changing my style so that I could tap into a number of different styles of conflict resolution. To Elizabeth's point, I think it's also important to understand the source of the fear. Are you fearful of being judged? Are you fearful of not being liked? Are you fearful of being wrong? And in my own case, when I worked on that, it was fear of being perceived as boastful and braggy and a know-it-all, combined with a little imposter syndrome. And once you know what the source of the fear is, you can go out and look for a lot of resources that are out there to help you work through it. For me, it was Tara Moore's book called Playing Big, where she addresses the whole concern about, being boastful and braggy and dumbing down and not shining in your full power, and it was very helpful. I do agree with the point that Elizabeth raised on walking into conflict and asking yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Because if you can handle it, then go for it, and if not, you navigate accordingly. So to give an example, I had a client who had an origination credit dispute on a small matter, and the dispute was with the chair of the firm's compensation committee. And we talked about it, and for the small dollars that she would have gotten had she elevated that dispute, it just, in that instance, it was just not what the strategic business decision should have been. So it wasn't right, it wasn't fair, but until things changed, it was strategic on her part not to make an issue over something so small when he has much greater influence and power. She's an equity partner on compensation. So you want to think when you're addressing conflict, which battles are worth fighting, which ones not so much. I also think it's important to keep, when you're dealing with conflict, keep it to the facts, because facts escalate less than emotion. When it's all about, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not just, then you get into an opinion mode, and people are very passionate about their opinions. But if you can make it about the numbers, the dollars, the facts, the data, it's harder to take it off topic. So for example, if you were going to say, I think I should get a bonus because I've done a good job, and then someone else responds, well, we're not giving bonuses, and then you get into the I should or you're not getting. But if you switched it around and said, I'd like to be considered for a bonus because my collections have increased by X, my impact to the bottom line is Y, I've billed X number of hours over the average, or I brought in 10 new clients, including, and you list the names, it's a lot harder to just shut the conversation down and say, no, you won't be getting a bonus. So when possible, I say, weave in those facts, and you'll have a more powerful outcome when dealing with conflict.
Okay, so I know that when the three of us were preparing for this webinar, this is Jeanne, we talked about it's really important to remember what's the worst that can happen, where's the fear coming from, what makes you shut down, what are your trigger points, and what is the end result that you want. So we all three agreed on those points. Everything we talked about today, we agreed, but we did distill it. Those are some of the things that we do want to keep in mind. The next question that we had towards the evaluation process is how to get respect. How to get respect as a junior lawyer. And I'll start with Marianne.
How to get respect as a junior lawyer. The first thing I would suggest is do quality work as a junior lawyer. You'll be evaluated on the quality of your work, and setting that first impression that you do good work will be lasting. It is a lot harder to turn around a first impression after it's been made. So getting started as a junior lawyer and wanting to get respect, do good work. The other thing I would say is learn how to say no graciously, quickly, because there's a difference between saying, no, I can't do it, and no, I actually, or not even saying no, saying, I'd love to help you on that project. Right now, I've got a commitment that's going to take me until Friday. I could get you a first draft on Monday, but I couldn't have a final product to you by Monday. Would that be helpful to you? So that you're offering a solution at the same time as you're letting someone know that in order to manage your own time and the commitments you have to others, you're not just closing them out, because early on, you'll get a reputation as to whether you're a team player, whether someone who goes the extra mile, whether you're someone who does good work, whether you work well with others. And along those points, I would also say, be careful not to overlook your staff. Your staff have been there longer than you have, likely. And they also have the ear of people in power in your firms and in your companies. And they may at times get pulled aside. I've seen it happen many times, and asked, what do you think of that new attorney? What do you think of that person? What are your impressions? And they'll be very straightforward in giving those impressions. So you want to remember that when you're trying to get respect and creating that first impression with attorneys in your firm, you should also be doing it with the staff in your firm.
And Elizabeth, we are running just a little bit behind our time schedule, but can you just add real quickly anything that we may have missed?
Sure. I think a lot of people have heard this, which is as a junior lawyer, treat your partners like they're your clients. And what that means is they are your clients. Keep them happy, get your work done timely, get it done early, have their back. Look out for other things that you can do for them. Listen for things in the office that might help them too, and take initiative. More experienced lawyers, we love it when younger lawyers take initiative. Now there's a fine line there. What's too much? When do you cross the line? But taking initiative and being helpful is so valuable to the busy, more senior partners and lawyers in the office. And then also just some very simple things that we would take for granted, but keep your office organized. How are you dressing in the office? Dress for the job that you want. Who are you developing relationships with? Diversify your relationships. Get to know people you don't even work very much with. Getting a strong start and developing respect even from people with whom you don't work that often. Those are some of my thoughts.
Thank you. And you all, Elizabeth was a litigator for a number of years. So let's move on to the next question that we received in the general category was maternity leave. Next slide. So how can I use my maternity leave effectively before my leave and upon my return? Elizabeth, I'm going to have you talk about preparing for maternity leave first.
Sure. Thanks, Jeannie. I've done this with a number of women lawyers, younger women lawyers, and they find it is so helpful. I mean, it almost goes without saying, but to prepare a memo on all the matters that they're working on so that the transition of that work to other lawyers who will cover it during the leave, so that is just seamless, so that all the answers or as much information is there as possible for the lawyers who will be taking over those matters, so that if a partner or a client calls or somebody calls, there is a memo there that somebody can go to, whether it's another lawyer or your administrative assistant or somebody else in the office can go, have phone numbers, contact information, the status of the matter. That is really key. And then also part of the preparation for your maternity leave is thinking about how much contact you want to have with the office, if any, while you're on maternity leave, and then anticipating what might your return look like, and what can you do before you even go on leave to make that transition back as smooth as possible. And to also recognize that you don't know, you don't know, especially if it's your first child, how having this baby might change your thought process, and how you might be viewing work, maybe exactly the same, maybe in different ways, what you'll be able to do physically. You can't anticipate that, but I encourage everyone to talk to other new mothers, especially with the first child. Talk to other new mothers and get advice for them too.
I think those memos to files, as complete as you can get, are very effective. This is Jeannie, and making sure those are in your file. So actually for your benefit as well, so you'll get less calls. But Marianne, what about preparing for a return and after preparation for a return, and what you do after you actually get back into the office?
Actually, I think I'll take it one step a little earlier, which is the best way to use it, I think, that was part of the question is, what's the best way to use maternity leave? I think the best way to use it is in whatever works best for you in the moment, because you're not going to know where you fall on that spectrum until you have the baby, and until you know what your support system is. Some people need to completely disconnect. Other people like to stay in touch, periodically, once a week, go on one night, set a designated time and do a few emails. And some people need to be engaged, and you never know which person you are. I've had clients who thought they were going to be one and prepared that way, and it turned out to be completely the opposite. Remember that the time you have during your maternity leave is a one shot in your lifetime with that child, and you're looking at 8 weeks, maybe 12, maybe 16, but your career and how you manage your career is a lifetime process, certainly adult lifetime process. So take the time you need in the way that feels right for you, so that you don't return to the office with resentment or wishing you had done things differently. Now, getting back to return to the office, I think it's very important to reach out in advance of going back, to give the key people that you work with a heads up that you'll be returning on such and such a date. You'd like to get some work in the pipeline. You'd like to have them start thinking about what cases and what matters, or if you're in-house, what projects they are going to have ready for you when you return, and that you're looking forward to that opportunity. If you wait until the first day that you go back, there's going to be more ramp up time, and that'll cause you stress because your billable hours will take longer to ramp up. I think once you're back, it's also really important to increase your visibility. There is unfortunately that stereotype that now that you've had a child, you're not going to be as invested in your career. And it's a stereotype you'll need to break, but it can be broken by being visible. You're going to want to walk around. You're going to want to attend firm gatherings, even if it's just 15 minutes of something that, let's say it's attorneys and staff getting together on a Friday afternoon to acknowledge someone. Just pop in for a little while. You maybe hand deliver something. Speak up at those of you in the larger firms, speak up at your practice group meetings. Walk down the hall when you can. You've got to show them that you are back in the game, that, just because you went off on maternity doesn't mean that you aren't actively engaged in your cases and you're no longer a team player. So those would be some of my suggestions.
That's great. I think that one thing when in preparation for your leave, it's important to let your clients know when you are coming back, an approximate time and that you are coming back, and increasing that visibility is critical. I did want to say one other thing that I'm not sure if it was addressed, but I want to be sure that it's addressed, that when you're on maternity leave, towards the end or sometime during your maternity leave, you want to practice, just like you practice for trial, or just like you teach little kids how to cross the street or how you were taught to cross the street. You need to practice going back to work. To try to do it all on the first day, it's not advisable. Just practice going back to work. If I can have the next slide. One more. Okay, so one of the next questions we have, and we're going to have to really shorten this area, is transferring out of private practice or transferring from in-house to in-house. That was our next question. How do you create opportunities to in-house, or how do you create other opportunities from either in-house to, private practice to in-house, in-house to in-house, in-house to another nonprofit situation? So creating opportunities. Marianne, as a global view?
First thing, I think it's very important to give some thought to what you want. Make sure you know your likes, your dislikes, what kind of clients you want to work with. If you're in-house, what kind of projects do you want to work with? What kind of responsibility do you want to have? What practice areas are most important to you? So that you really have a clear vision of what it is that you want before you start looking elsewhere to get it. Because I have often found that it's best to take the first approach to see if you can get it where you're at, because there are warts everywhere, and at least you know what they are where you're currently at. Now, if you're in-house and you want to explore, is there another division that you can service? Is there a way that you can talk to your GC about getting more responsibility or taking on a new area, a new project, something that would further your skills before you think about moving to another company. But if a move is your next step, then the best way is to reach out confidentially and cautiously to your network. Let them know what you're looking for and be very clear about what it is you're looking for, so that that person can then take that message beyond the listen and let you know when they hear of something, because 70% of jobs are filled before they're even advertised, because someone knows that a GC is going to be retiring at the end of the year, or there's going to be a major restructuring in the spring, or there's going to be changes of other sorts which are going to create opportunities. And you want to have your network out there listening for you. Every person knows approximately 150 other people whom they would feel comfortable passing a name along if they thought it could be helpful. So every time you launch one person to be listening for what you want, you've given yourself access to another 150 out there. Those would be my initial thoughts.
And Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I mean, we talked yesterday specifically about using LinkedIn, and I know Marianne is a huge fan of that as well, in terms of using LinkedIn and developing your relationships with other in-house counsel, or if you're not yet in-house, with in-house counsel. And that maybe you may think it's just sort of superficial or artificial. You don't yet know these people, but just even forming that initial link on LinkedIn can then lead to some more down the road. So really using LinkedIn to develop your network. And even if you don't know somebody at the company and the company doesn't have an opening, go ahead and send a LinkedIn request to the counsel, do searches, do specific searches for counsel at companies that you would like to work at, for HR directors and people like that, and COOs at companies that you're interested in, and make those connections even ahead of time. Even if it's 2 or 3 years ahead of time, start at least getting those people on your LinkedIn network, and don't let that hold you back, that you don't know what you will do next. You don't know how you're going to advance that relationship next. At least get that connection there, and then you can see what's happening at the companies and what those people are doing. And as you meet other people, who knows who. People come to me a lot because they know that I'm connected with so many in-house people and other people on LinkedIn, and they'll say, Elizabeth, you know this person, or do you know this person? Many times I do, many times I don't, but I can go make a call, or I can find out more, I can talk to someone else who knows more. That also leads me to another piece of advice, is try to identify people who are super connectors. And I'm not just talking about someone on LinkedIn or online, but people who are the types of people, the personalities that I think Malcolm Gladwell would call the mavens, or the connectors, those people who know a lot of people and who are wired to help. And if you don't know them, but you can identify them and find a way to get to know them and develop a relationship with them, that can help you exponentially in your career, and how many people you can know and develop relationships with too. And then you can be strategic from there. And if you're not in-house yet, you can't join the Association of Corporate Counsel, but if you are in-house, I encourage you to join it. I tell you to join it, even if your company won't pay for it. Get involved in the chapters, start to meet people that way, and develop your name with people who are already in-house. And if you are not in-house yet, at least try to meet some people who are active in it and get to know people they know.
So this is Jeannie. I'd like to add on that your volunteer work and committee work with the bar, or any type of committee work with nonprofits, is really important, because you will find other lawyers or other people who, they don't have to be lawyers to give you notice that something is being looked for within an in-house situation. Business people know that lawyers are also departing, so you want to be sure to keep your volunteer work up and your committee work going. I also wanted to say that when we were talking about the Association of Corporate Counsel and preparing for today's webinar, I did go out and look, and I know a lot of times people do not want to use their own money, but I think it's such well worth it, because you never know where you might have to choose to take another position out of choice or not out of choice. But I think the yearly dues are only $350, and I'm going to follow up to what Elizabeth said. You can't join if you're in private practice, but if you are in between positions, you can check the box looking for in-house position, and you get a 30-day free trial. And I would really highly encourage that if you're between positions, or you're going in-house to in-house, you might not be in a position to be able to pay for those fees, they can waive them, or you can get a free trial for 30 days. So I really strongly encourage ACC, even if it has to be out of your own pocket. Can we go to the next slide, please? So we're going to talk now about the networking opportunities that are here in your last quarter, and which are plenty, because there are so many conferences right now, and of course the holidays are coming up. So I am going to start with Marianne for conferences.
Sure. Yes, we're heading into a big conference season before the holidays. The tips I would have are actually in an article that's on my website, which you're welcome to check out. But the brief points are, first thing is to plan ahead, meaning block off the time for the conference, but also block off the time for the follow-up on your calendar, because 40% of the value is in what you do after you finish attending the conference. And then you're going to want to see if you can get a list of the attendees in advance. Some organizations give them out and some don't, but you want to review that list for contacts, existing clients, prior clients, referral sources, and create a short list of goals so that you know who it is you want to meet, and what you want to accomplish when you go. You'll want to reach out and connect ahead of time, just even sending a simple 2-sentence email. I'm looking forward to seeing you at the upcoming ABA Women Rainmakers event, and then I'm hoping that you will have a chance to get together. I'll be on the lookout for you when I'm there. Even if the person can't attend, they may email you back. You've created that touch, and you can follow up after the seminar and let them know that you missed seeing them that year, hoping to see them next year. Maybe there's some materials you want to pass on to them. It's important to read up on who the presenters and the faculty are. There might be someone, a panelist or a presenter, that you want to introduce yourself to and go up afterwards and authentically let them know what you found helpful about their presentation. Knowing also what the presenters are and what the faculty are will help you strategically navigate your breakout sessions, which you want to coordinate with referral sources, clients, contacts, and see if maybe you can sit together or do something together, including social events. You're going to want to know what you have in common with people at the conference so that you can frame your accomplishments in a way that matters to the audience. So when you're going to an event that's heavily populated by lawyers, you'll be able to describe your accomplishments in a way that lawyers would connect. But if you're going to something that's a trade association for the retail sector, you're going to want to brush up on accomplishments that someone in that sector would resonate with. Then I suggest setting goals. 2 or 3. Do you want to meet new people? Do you want to connect with someone that you saw last year? Do you want to reach out to a panelist because you've always wanted to meet them? Do you want to go up to the executive director and say you'd like to volunteer to participate in a committee? Do that kind of goal setting, and when you walk in, the conference won't feel as random. And then make sure that you're picking where you spend your time at the conference, strategically recognizing your own pacing. For those of you who are introverted, it may be good to step out for a few minutes, catch your breath, get rejuvenated, and then go back in. For those of you who are extroverted, you may enjoy just powering through, but make sure that you're doing it mindfully and strategically so you get the most out of it. Those would be my thoughts.
Thank you. I'm going to add on to that. We're going to talk about holiday events, but I want to tag on to what Marianne just said, that it's important if you're an introvert to set your goals before you go, or even if you're an extrovert, really, set your goals of what you want to accomplish, because so many times I've heard so many clients say they're so frustrated going to conferences like they didn't achieve something. Of course, the first question from a coach's perspective will be, well, what were your goals? So be sure to set your goals, whether it's a social event or a conference. What is it that you want to achieve? And keeping in mind that a holiday event, it is a business opportunity, but it's also a social event. So you don't want to be shoving your business card into someone's hand. Not that anyone ever does that, but the saying goes. Eat before you go, because if you have your hand with one drink and food in another at the social events, you can't really shake hands with anyone. So try to eat before you go or eat on your way out. Just grab some food as you're going out. Now, what I think is really important too, because you're at a social event, is where you put your name tag. Think about what hand you stretch out, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. If you're right-handed and you're reaching for someone else's right hand, that badge should be on your right. Well, most people are right-handed. Your name badge should be on the right-hand side of your clothing. And so many of us are so used to putting it on the left because we're right-handed. But if you're right-handed, be sure to put it on the right. And actually, since most people are right-handed, sorry, going back to this, put it on your right lapel so that people can easily see your name. Or if they have forgotten who you are and you don't want that awkward moment, then they could see your name quite easily. It's better if you're an introvert to take breaks, but also to get to the event earlier so you can get a lay of the land and kind of calm your nerves and kind of look around and see the situation. It's easier for extroverts to enter into any type of circle, but I always say, look at the way that people are positioned within a group of people. If the shoes are all pointed in, that's kind of a closed group. It's much easier to enter a group that has shoes pointed out because it's kind of a way of welcoming other people. If you see two people in a very, off to the side and like clearly in a quiet personal conversation, that's not a group to try to enter. So kind of look where the shoes are and whether people have already naturally selected themselves off to the side, because chances are they're going to be having a personal conversation. Now, I do want to say that being exited from a particular type of conversation, some people find difficult. So I really want to encourage you, if you need to exit a conversation, at the beginning of the conversation, you know you don't want that conversation to go on too long, say, oh, I'm so glad to see you. I just want you to know that I do have to meet some other people because either I have to leave you early or my goal is to meet, touch base with a certain number of people before I leave this event. So you can cut your exit strategy earlier. Or if you say I'm going to go to the ladies' room, then be sure that you do go to the ladies' room, because people do watch and you don't want to offend anyone. It's a holiday party. Keep everyone in a good mood. So do what you say you're going to do. Go to the food line, because chances are you can start a conversation with someone else in the food line, leave them there, and make a graceful exit. Or offer to get them something at the food line and do come back with it, but then you can exit again yourself. Okay, we are going to move on to a quick question that we're going to only spend a short time because we are running behind. Can we go to how do we find slide 17? How do we find a life or business coach? I'm just going to open that up to Marianne first, and just real quickly so that we can move on to some other questions.
Okay, I'm not a life coach, so I can only speak to the question of finding a business coach, but I think the first thing is to make sure they understand your industry, because legal is a unique animal, and you've got to have someone who understands the law firm hierarchy and what it's like to be a litigator with demands from clients and the firm and the court. It's different than other businesses. And for those of you who are in-house, I think it's important to make sure that you find a coach who understands what that means. That you are responsible to your GC, or if you're a GC, you're responsible to the CEO, or you have to find the best business solution as well as the best legal solution, or you have to justify your existence to the bottom line. Those kinds of push and pull factors matter in coaching and in putting solutions and action into place. I think the best way to go about finding one is to ask for referrals, see the results in someone else, and ask if they're working with a coach. Word of mouth is, I think, the best source. I found mine because a woman who had won the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year was working with me, and I saw the results, and I asked her one day, and she said she was working with a coach, and I said, can I have her name? And I've been working on and off with that coach for over 10 years. It's important to find someone that you can establish trust and rapport with, because candor and the ability to be vulnerable so that you can be receptive to the suggestions that a coach gives you is really important. And they may be pushing you outside your comfort zone, and if the trust isn't there, it won't be as effective. And last thing I would say is interview 2 or 3 coaches and then pick the one that's the best fit for you. A good coach is going to understand why you need to shop around to find the best fit.
Elizabeth?
I think Marianne is absolutely right on everything she said, and the fit and the trust is such a big piece, and finding someone who you can talk to over the phone, and even in that initial conversation when you're talking with him or her for maybe 10-15 minutes, just to see if it would be a good fit. Ask whatever questions you would like to ask, and I'm sure that they'll probably ask you, what are you interested in? What would success look like from coaching for you, and what would you like to achieve, and see how it feels to talk to that person and what kind of listener they are. And again, as Marianne said, what do they know about your industry, and what do they bring to the table? I know that so many people who have hired me over the years have said, Elizabeth, you get it. You've been in a firm. You know what this is like. You've worked in these situations, and that's really important to the people who tend to hire me, that I've been there. But that's not necessarily important to everybody. But it is important that the person knows about your industry, knows the types of challenges, whether you're in-house or in private practice, whether you're a solo or a medium-sized law firm, whether you're a newer lawyer or a non-equity or a new practice group leader or a seasoned partner. All those different things make a difference, and really see who you feel comfortable with. And don't be afraid to make a decision that you're not going to work with someone who you thought you were going to work with, or that you're going to actually be talking to somebody and then choosing someone other than them. It's okay. We know it. We know that. You have your choices, and you're going to go with someone you trust and who you really think is a good fit.
And this is Jeannie. What I want to say, yes, it has to be a good fit where you really feel comfortable. Coaching can only move forward if both parties really have a deep connection. I believe that most coaches want what's best for their clients. So if they feel it's not a good fit, they will let you know, because they want you to be able to make the changes that you want to make a change in your own life. That being said, I have a question here, but I can't read the question in its entirety. But I think the general question is this a coaching call today? And no, today what we're doing is the three of us have gotten together and taken the questions that we have received and provided the best answers that we can give to you on this call, based on all of our diverse experiences. Marianne is in the, I don't know, Pacific Standard Time, but she's in Arizona. I'm in Colorado, and Elizabeth is back east. So we have 3 different regions, and actually the answers that we all came with are pretty much in alignment with one another. So if you're thinking this is a coaching call, no, it's coaches on call, and we're just answering the questions that have come to us either through this webinar or before you, or when people signed up. Okay, can we move to the slide on support and barriers? Okay, so all coaches, when they're working with you, they're going to always be looking to see what support do you need and what barriers are in your way. The next slide, please. So you need to identify the personal keys to what made you successful in the past, whether it's personal or professionally. And generally, there is a big overlap between the two. And then with respect to barriers, next slide, please. We all get in our own way, and generally it's our friends or our significant other, partner, or spouse who are the first ones who hopefully can tell you how you're getting in your own way. And as Elizabeth emphasized earlier, and Marianne, you need to know what to say no to. No by itself is an answer. Sometimes I think we tend to, just not women, but people tend to want to feel like they have to give no, but, and then explain away. No isn't an answer. Now, the way you say no is also important. So think of how the tone of your voice is when you are saying no. And then, of course, you need to know what you want to say yes to. So by saying no and yes, you'll determine much of those barriers. And if you decide to, you need to be very aware of yourself to decide what the support is that you need to get somewhere else than where you are currently.
Okay, I have the first question. It comes with a little bit of a story. So it says, I've been told to speak up or be louder, but I don't want to take part in some of the conversations because I disagree or because I think it is a waste of time. I know part of it is because I'm afraid of conflict and negative feedback, but I also feel like I'm being asked to be someone I am not. Is this normal?
I'll let Marianne start with that.
Wow. Well, to your point about this not being a coaching call, I think to know if that's normal, I would need to work with the person to know if that's usual to them, because there are a lot of different circumstances that could play into that. But is it normal to not want to speak up? Is it normal to not want to create conflict? I think to our earlier points today, absolutely. What was another part of that question other than, I think you said there was a story there, and I think I'd need to know the story in order to know the context in which the challenge occurred.
Yeah,
This is Elizabeth.
that was the story.
Okay. This is Elizabeth. I have just a couple quick thoughts on that. I think if we step back and maybe look at the bigger picture and the woman who asked the question doesn't want to engage in whatever that conversation is. But what's the bigger message is that the person who's telling her you need to speak up or be engaged more, or have participate more. I'd say, well, are there other situations, are there other meetings or conversations where you can assert yourself more, where there are things that you care about and you do want to engage in more, and maybe step it up in those ways, purposefully in those situations, so that you can respect who you are and your values about not engaging in something you think is a waste of time or where you don't want to be in a conflict, but actually take what the person is telling you and suggesting that you engage more, or you speak up more, or you voice your opinions more. Choose where you want to do that and do it more in those other situations. Just try to engage more in those situations.
This is Marianne. To the point of authenticity and saying things in a way that works for you, there's a book that I've read and use. It's called How to Say It for Women, Communicating with Confidence and Power Using the Language of Success. It's by Phyllis Mindell, Mindell. And I found that very helpful, because oftentimes it's, in order to be authentic, we've got to say what we believe and what we mean, but there are many different ways to say it. And sometimes we have to adapt it in order for it to be able to be heard by the person that we're talking with, particularly if we already anticipate defensiveness or barriers or stereotypes. And I found that book helpful in addressing that.
And I might mention that earlier, Elizabeth and I talked about I forgot to talk about a book, but Elizabeth talked about her book, Difficult Conversations. Having Difficult Conversations is a great read. And also, I think The 4 Agreements is another great read to remember. A lot of times it's not personal. So when you're feeling kind of low because something has not quite gone the way that you thought it was, or just came out of the blue, I think that those 2 books are also fabulous books to keep to get on your bookshelf. Now, if there are other questions that we can't get to today, I'm going to ask Sasha to send them to us, and we will answer them. I think that's the best way, because we're almost at the top of the hour, and my cursor is not working. So it's just one of those technology things, but we can work with it, and we'll get back to whoever asked those questions. Can I have the next slide, please? So I do want to thank you for coming today, and thank Marianne and Elizabeth. It's always so wonderful to be able to work with these 2 women, because we always learn so much, or things become clear about how our own practices are going and what we need to perhaps advance, not only ourselves, but our clients. By advancing ourselves, we're able to also advance our clients. I want the next slide about reminding everyone about our next upcoming webinar, and it's going to be about Conversations Across Generations on December 11th, and our moderator will be Carol Bass. And I want to, next slide, thanks to our support team, Gabriella, Sasha, and Julie Harshberger. Julie was the one who helped me with the graphic design today. And if you like today's webinar, which I hope you did, it's a team of 6 or 7 people directly, and many, many more. So thank you to our support team. And the next slide here is to your successful rainmaking. We hope to see you on December 11th.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks, Jeannie.
And everyone
Thanks,
on the
Marianne.
That's all the time that we have for today. I'd like to thank the Women Rainmakers Committee for attending, and all of you for attending our webinar today. I'd also like to thank our moderator and panelists. We will now conclude the webinar.